It's 3:15, and that means it's time for
The Real Deal with Bill McNeil.
That's right. Welcome once again to The Real Deal with Bill McNeil. I'm your host, Bill McNeil, and you're probably wondering exactly what is the real deal today.
Hey, good question.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes here to talk about some of the information, some of the news that was happening while I was out away. And there was some interesting things happening at DC Comics. Some people may interpret it as the rats are abandoning ship. Maybe something bad is happening at DC. I have a little bit different takeaway from some of these senior people that are leaving DC of their own accord. They're not being downsized or anything like that. They've seen what's happening over at Warner Media. I guess it's going to be Warner Brothers Discovery now. And I wanted to talk to my good friend, comic book writer, award-winning editor, Joe Corral about it. How you doing, Joe?
I'm all right, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. So we had a couple of people announce that they were leaving DC Comics. It kind of came out. It sounds like there were probably more than just these two, but these are the two names that came out. First up was a group editor, senior editor. He was also a group editor on Batman, Jamie Rich. You probably know that name. If you don't, there's a good chance you've read his comics. Then also a senior vice president from DC Universe, Sam Aides quit as well. Interesting stuff here. I can understand how some people could say this and be like, they smell what's happening. DC Comics is in trouble and they're exiting. I take a little bit of a different view. What's just your initial thoughts on these two people leaving?
My initial thoughts are when it comes to Jamie, it's maybe the people he was working with and he was closest with are not really going to be involved in the company, and has a viable option to go elsewhere. And when it comes to that VP, was it Sam Aides? With him, I think because of the DC Universe thing, it might have been he got a certain promotion. DC Universe was also a streaming app for shows, and then got reduced to just being about comics. So I think outside of any of the changes in the company, probably felt like he got a raw deal in that, and is looking for somewhere else to go and get back into the streaming television movies kind of game.
Yeah, I probably felt maybe it is a demotion if you kind of look at it. Yeah. It's not like he was get grandfathered over into the HBO Max stuff where all that material, the streaming content would have went over to as far as the DC stuff. Now, Jamie Rich is interesting. This was the editor that essentially took over the Batman books and became the Batman group editor after Mark Doyle was unceremoniously fired after a disagreement with Tom King during his run. And Jamie Rich has been intrinsically tied to Tom King for a long time. He's edited a lot of his books. He's doing essentially all the DC Black Label stuff that you're getting right now, Strange Adventures, Batman, Catwoman, Rorschach. He's editing all of those. Yep. I think he also did, there are a couple other books from Tom King he did back in the day. What were they? Sheriff of Babylon, Mr. Miracle. So he's done a lot of work. He's also done a lot of work with Joel Jones and things like that. I've heard a rumor, Joe, and I don't know if you've heard this, but that Tom King's time at DC is winding down. That there's a good chance that this Supergirl story that is, I think it starts this week or next week. I know it's soon. That's going to be the last thing Tom King does at DC for a while at least. And maybe Jamie Rich, frustrated, probably saw a lot of his friends fired with what we've seen with AT&T, like merging Warner Media with Discovery, and they still have a controlling interest, but they're kind of making its own entity after firing and all these downsizings and changing the divisions. They even closed down movie studios during their time as under their stewardship. I imagine there's some frustration with that. Sure. Maybe some ideas like seeing what a person he's closely related to as far as their work, moving on to bigger and better things. Probably some frustrations and had opportunities elsewhere. He's been on some very successful books.
Oh, yeah. No, I think I first became really aware of Jamie around Young Animal, because he was kind of like the group editor around that, working with Gerard Way after Shelley Bond had left DC. So that's when I became like really aware of Jamie's presence there. And yeah, he's been around for a while. He's got great connections. He knows a lot of people there. We've seen other people from DC who got let go to other places. Mark Doyle's over at IDW. Michelle Wells is over at Tapas Media. There are other people who will probably get announcements of jobs that are working at magazines or something like that. Like, we still don't know where Brian Cunningham is right now. Jamie could potentially also be maybe jumping on with Tom King to edit a bunch of image books or something like that. Maybe, for all we know, if Tom King is potentially not going to do stuff at DC for a little bit, it's probably going to be in part because he's doing creator-owned work. And maybe he could strike a deal with Jamie where he's like, hey, Jamie, you go do these other things if you want. I'll hire you to edit my books. An image book from Tom King is going to do X amount to make sure that, an editor like Jamie gets covered. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways this could go. And it'll be interesting to see where Jamie Rich lands. It's going to be interesting to see where some of these other people land too. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely think there's a possibility of Tom King doing creator-owned work and having Jamie as his editor on it.
So you mentioned Brian Cunningham. I knew I had seen that name recently. He's doing editorial work at Mad Ghost under Jeff Johns' Mad Ghost imprinted Image Comics.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Exactly.
I don't know if that's a full-time gig, but he's obviously doing some independent work. Yeah. And JB Rich, like I said, he's worked on some big name titles, and I imagine his name will be in there. And they're, like you said, this is a person with 21 years experience, senior vice president. That's when we're talking about Sam Aids, that's a big position. I imagine that is a very nice salary, and to give that up, it does show a level of frustration within the company, or maybe there's not any trust anymore. After you get rid of that many people, Bobby Chase, we had Dan Didio leave. They kind of cleared the board. Michelle Wells, she did not win out as far as the new editor-in-chief position. I believe Marie Javins ended up getting it. They just wiped out like hundreds of years of experience in the comic book industry during this restructure under AT&T. I imagine he was furious, and now to see that there's likely to be another restructure through another boss, because it's not the head of Warner Media that's in charge. It's the head of Discovery that's kind of in charge of this whole merger that's happening. Yeah. That can't be good, because they've already kind of cleared the decks. There just wasn't a lot of meat left on the bone to have these important key figures just decide up and leave. DC probably can't afford a lot of these to be happening and just keep the ship going as normal. Yeah.
But that might not be the worst thing at the end of the day. We saw the different implosions over the years in the late 70s and the late 90s. But by that logic, we're due for an implosion, and that seems to be, to an extent, what's happening. Like trimming the lines could be good things here. Maybe if they end up having smaller editorial and they end up putting out less books and focusing more on the quality of the book, we'll end up in a better place. But also, now, like, LA is riddled with former DC editors. You got Brian Cunningham, Jamie Rich, Andy Corey, Shelley Bond. Like, there's a bunch of former editors there. This is, I don't know if they'd all work together. I mean, Shelley Bond's done a bunch of Kickstarters. She has a Kickstarter up right now for another anthology. She's doing, and those always make, $40,000, $50,000 or so $1,000. That's, if they ended up joining forces, or even a couple of them partnering up, like you might get a fast-tracked indie publisher out of that. Like there's a lot of things that could happen. It's a lot of the pieces are in place here for interesting things to happen in the coming years.
Similar to what Axel Alonso was able to kind of put together with AWA. Yeah. He was an upstart publisher, but there's a lot of big names on there. Yeah. Because he obviously had all these connections through his work as the, he was an editor at Marvel and moved up as well, all the way up to editor-in-chief.
Yeah. I mean, the Rolodexes of just Brian Cunningham, Shelley Bond, and Jamie Rich, just those three are impressive. And if one of them went off on their own to do something, that would be a lot. If two of them joined forces, it's really a lot. I mean, with Jamie Rich, like, for example, and with Jamie and Shelley, it's like they both were able to get people like Gerard Way and some others in. Brian Cunningham, obviously working with Jeff Johns. Right now, Gary Frank. I mean, Brian Cunningham's Rolodex is really impressive. He was editing a lot of the Superman stuff. I think he was on.
I'll be shocked if he's not on that. Peter J. Tomasi, Brad Walker. Was it Snipe and Slug? This is the next series coming out under Mad Ghost. With some known DC talent.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's I mean, Brian Cunningham also, I think, was the editor who did a lot with like Bendis when he came over. So, if you got someone who has Jeff Johns, Pete Tomasi, Bendis and Bendis's crew of, Fraction, DeConnick, and other people, like, that's the kind of thing where you could throw some stuff around and be like, hey, look, I'm going to make a new publishing arm. These are the people I can tap. He can get money in pretty quick, probably, I would think, if that's the kind of stuff he can show and become a player similar to Axel and Gemis with AWA in just like a couple of years or so. So there's a lot that could happen.
There's a lot of, it's crazy. It's a good time to be an independent publisher. We're seeing, records broken almost seems like daily now. I think I just talked yesterday, or maybe it's later today, where I talk about the sales for these upcoming Spawn books from Todd McFarlane. We've had the overwhelming success of Berserker. Obviously, that is tied into Keanu Reeves, so that's a little bit different. But there have been a lot of those, was it the 16th issue of Something is Killing the Children? Sales were phenomenal. The, what is it, James Tynan's other book? The Department of Truth was a big-time seller as well initially. Nocturno sounds like it did really well. So a lot of people are realizing you do not need to be associated with DC Comics and Marvel and their IPs to sell a comic book. If you have a brand name and you have a good idea, you get some good artists on it, you can absolutely pump your sales well over 100,000 at least for the debut issue. And we're talking about Spawn, you're going over 200,000-300,000 on the milestone, staying over that 80,000 threshold once you get out of that. So it's a good time to be an independent comic creator. You know that. It sounds like you've had a lot of success lately as well. So
it's been going all right. I do comics full time, which is wonderful. Not a lot of people are able to do that, and I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, no, comics good.
I don't think this is the end of DC Comics. I don't think this is a sign that DC Comics is about to fold ship. I think this is an absolute sign of frustration with the management and the way that Warner Media and its assets have been managed under AT&T, being pushed off into this merger. So many people fired, losing their jobs, likely had a lot of relationships. People that they didn't feel like deserve to get fired get sent to the wayside. Now it looks like there's going to be another restructure. People have had enough. And they need to get some stability there if they want to, get to that point where everything's firing on all cylinders again. You can't just have this much turnover and chaos.
Yeah, and that will happen. I have no doubt in my mind that we're going to get to that point. It's a little rocky right now, but this is not unique to comics. This happens in plenty of other industries. This happens in industries where it happens in a worse way.
Hey, in the military, everybody moves every 2 or 3 years. And next thing you know, the entire team's changed, and you got to get used to each other. And the next thing you know, you're firing on all cylinders again. You just got to get on that goal, and everyone know what they're doing.
Yeah, and you know what? If there are people who see the changes and they want out, great. If you're in a position where you can get out comfortably, that's fantastic. A lot of people don't have that ability, and yeah, and that ends up working great for everyone involved. If someone can move on to something they're going to enjoy more, and if the company can get someone in that's going to be more dedicated to the mission of the company, that's good for everybody. So it's easy to get lost in, you know, the hyperbole around this and the everything's falling apart. But that's not the case. It's just some people who are making their own decision that they're ready to move on to something else. You know, Jamie Rich has been part of DC for a while. You know, maybe he's edited everything he's wanted to edit there and is ready for something new. Maybe no matter what, he was going to want to move on.
If you look at it glass is half full, this is probably a good indication that the market itself is somewhat healthy, that people can leave a job where they've been a senior VP for 21 years at a company and say, yeah, there's another opportunity out there. Or if you're Jamie Rich, who's worked on all these projects, I don't need Batman anymore. I can go and make my own opportunities elsewhere, whether it be in independent publishing, betting on myself, maybe doing some crowdfunding, whatnot. But obviously the comic book industry is not dead, or they wouldn't be looking for new opportunities in it. And from everything we've heard, that is exactly what Jamie Rich is looking for. Yeah,
absolutely. This might be a more positive sign than I think some people are giving him credit for.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.